guys that when you walk into a room, you lift my spirits.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Likewise.
There's not a lot of people like that. Not enough people. I guess there are lots, but not enough. So what are we doing today, Brian?
So we are talking about disaster recovery, which
We
is
could start with the
mostly,
fact that I didn't finish both the training
so
sessions.
I guess we could do that too. You had briefly mentioned, so you were still working on chapter 19. Is that what I
There are
hear?
lots, but yes. Yes, I'm not proud to admit that. Actually, I'm just at the end of the chapter. I finally, after all these, I mean, I guess one of the good things about using the PowerPoint is I finally got like a format that I think is kind of rolls. But man, I mean, how many slides has it been in the classes I created? It's got to be like 1,000 slides, man.
If not more, probably.
I hate PowerPoint. I wish
So
we could just like teach it without PowerPoints.
I think
AI
that,
will take care of all of that. You'll just say,
yeah,
create a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, aren't there services now where you can just like basically talk into it and then it'll create the lesson for you?
Yes.
Like, I think I saw that on a
Brian,
SANS.
where were you 1,000 slides ago, man? Seriously, this is like insulting. It hurts.
Honestly, 1,000 slides ago, I was an AI denier. I'm not gonna lie. I've recently changed my mind, but in the way that it is helpful. But when we started off this class, I was like, no, I'm not touching AI. I mean, I don't like it. I don't want to use it. But I've come to the conclusion that it's here. It's always going to be here from now on, and I have to get with the program and
Mhm.
need to I'm not trustful of it. I don't want to
Joshua,
limit.
congratulations. He passed the
Woo,
CISSP on
Joshua!
Congrats, John.
7-1. That was yesterday.
Awesome. Congrats, man.
Um, yeah. So I live in Mexico. President Trump, or I don't know, I don't know who runs those things, but they just sanctioned the bank here in Mexico that I bank with. So you have 21 days essentially to get your money out of there because they sanctioned them for money laundering because of the cartel stuff. So I spent today getting my money out of a bank and putting it into another bank. I was supposed to get a haircut today. I didn't get a haircut, as you can see, because now this here is like over my lips. So it's kind of a good weight loss thing because I can't get any food in here past the mustache. Sorry, I totally interrupted whatever the hell you were saying.
I was just ranting about AI.
Oh yeah, it's the shit, man. Everybody's using it. I'm using AI to tell me how to make love to my wife now. Is that
TMI.
Too
wrong?
much information. Yeah, that's
Oh, that I went too far again. Okay.
yeah, that's too far on that one.
If only AI would have been speaking on my behalf, I would have known that.
Yes. Well, that's how we know you're not a deep fake.
Yeah, I wrote a blog post last week about what AI is good for and what it's
What is it
not.
good for?
Absolutely nothing. Say it
Oh,
again.
so I'm an instructor, as you may know. I teach at university, and I can tell when students use AI and just copy paste because there's no soul to their answers. And I've
Mhm.
talked with musicians similarly. They'll listen to music created by AI and they can just instinctively tell. So use it to
Yeah.
help enhance who you are, but not replace who you are. Like, how can we replace this awesome group talking about disaster recovery? How's that for transition?
Yeah.
So, what do we need to
Yeah.
know about disaster recovery? Why do we need to know about disaster recovery?
Dude, you don't have to worry about it. It's not going to happen to you. Everybody
And
knows that.
everything's in the cloud anyway. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, yeah, don't worry about it.
exactly.
So well, if you're doing everything in the cloud, it means you don't have to worry about it, right? Because
Exactly.
the cloud never
Mhm.
goes away. It's never going to go down. You're always going to have an internet connection.
And if you always keep your resume like up to date in paper format, you're
Right.
good.
Should you have your disaster recovery plan in a format that's not online or
Yes.
on a server?
Well, in multiple places. I think oh no, that was the backups, the 3-2-1 rule. Yes. Yeah, you always have to make sure, as well as like all your, because I've seen this happen before, as well as all your authentication, your password database, encryption keys. Too many times I've seen people try to restore databases, but the encryption key was only stored on the backup. So, I mean, you couldn't get the back. I mean, you couldn't get the encryption key because the encryption. I mean, it was a mess because they couldn't get their encryption key. I can't remember the exact scenario, but essentially dead in the water. I mean, when the data's gone, the data's gone. There's no way to get it back.
Well, that's a form of data destruction. Encrypt it and
That
destroy the
is.
key.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with disaster recovery plans, it's rare to see one, I think, that's actually functional. I think most people have done their disaster recovery plans for compliance purposes.
Mhm.
So they checked the box, they took a template, they changed some names, they might have done, gone through the motions, but they didn't truly own it. I mean, if
Until
you're going to
something
go
bad
to,
happens.
yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing about human nature, man. I mean, it's like the pendulum is way over here. You're not doing enough. You're not taking it seriously enough. And then the bad thing happens and the pendulum swings way over to the other side. And now you've got all the budget in the world, all the attention in the world, but it's too much. It is possible to spend too much, right? I'd rather not spend information security dollars than misspend them. And so I think the logical thing is to stay in the middle, to be pragmatic, to be responsible. And I think that's a lot about what we're doing, what we try to do when we're leading information security programs. It's not, information security isn't the risk, it's a risk. Understanding that executives have, reputational risk, compliance risk, financial risk, all these other risks that they need to account for. We just want to slot this in as one of those other things. And I think once you can acknowledge that with executive management, then you can get more and speak the language of business. I mean, that goes so far
Mhm.
in getting the attention you need around disaster recovery and incident response is talk in terms of money, as much as you can.
And using data. One of the things I'm just quickly
Yeah,
reviewing the book, and I put in the chat, finding the seismic information about your area, flood information.
yeah.
I've done assessments for organizations where we looked at crime rates of the
Mm-hmm.
area where they're looking to have an office to understand and be
ADT's
able
got
to,
great data on that one.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So it's being able to use that as part of quantifying the risk equation and
Right.
then being able to quantify what is that probability of occurrence of a disaster event. You
Right.
can often use that data very proactively then to be able to help make your case why you need to take disaster recovery seriously. So what
Yeah.
do you think about, so I see in the book here, it talks physical book 877, pandemics. That'll never happen. I literally
Hell
had
no,
that
man. I've
conversation.
never seen it.
Yeah, no, zombie apocalypse, that's never will happen. So
Mm-mm.
how do we make sure the human loop is included as a part of disaster recovery? Because you can have all of your systems up and running, but what if you don't have humans?
I think most of it comes down to communications for me.
Mhm.
It's about communications. It's about empathy. That's one of the things
Mhm.
you won't get from AI, by the way, is
No.
empathy. Um,
So reason
trying
why
to
I
think of
mention
things
it.
from their perspective, right? We all love the business we're working on. We love the money that
Mhm.
we're making. We've invested so much. Let's not lose it. One of the things that's also really where it's been a double-edged sword is using logic over emotion.
Mhm.
In a lot of these discussions, which the double-edged sword is one, logic can always be defended if it's solid logic, right? If you're challenging where I'm coming from in what I'm proposing, I can support it with logic, right? The flip side of that is sometimes you come off as being too cold and not caring enough about the human piece. I think that's probably in disaster recovery over the years, that's probably been my biggest thorn in my side is not accounting for the people emotions.
Mhm.
That's why I have that saying that if your incident response plan and disaster recovery plan don't account for panic, it's trash.
Mhm. Or just human events, like we have tornadoes here in Nebraska, and when people's houses have holes in them, they don't want to come into work to help build systems.
Mhm.
It's kind of weird. I don't understand, but no. Um,
Yeah,
Taking that into account, do you have human backups that will help?
good point. Really good point.
Rarely, is that included as a part of the plan? I love going through tabletops and then including, all right, Jacob, our lead expert system administrator, is now, out with the latest pandemic, and now John, you have to run with it. What are you going to do?
Right. That's a good point. I mean, in your disaster recovery plan, having, backup personnel,
Yep.
contingencies for the contingency, I think
Yep.
is a good help. That's where this is another place where cross training comes into play. We talk about
Yep.
cross training in terms of identifying insider threats and stuff like that. It certainly helps in disaster recovery as well.
So, and I
And
also added into,
automate all the shit that's repetitive.
yes, that's where agentic AI will come in, right? Oh, well, let's
Oh,
not
for
go there.
sure. Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
so wait, so we're talking about business continuity and such. So um, for those who aren't aware, where do you start with business continuity? If you don't have anything, what do you do?
Continuity or disaster recovery?
Sorry, disaster recovery.
Ooh, ooh.
Okay. Yeah. And
Ready.gov. Anyway,
yeah. And the reason why I asked that, because that's really common, Brian. I like the fact that you put it that way, because one of the things we don't do enough, I think, is question what people are actually saying, to ensure that we're speaking the same language. So because you'll run into this in the field all the time, where an executive might be talking business, say business continuity, and just to clarify, I hate assumptions. They always get us. So,
CYA,
clarifying. Yeah,
challenge
for
your
sure.
assumptions. Anyway,
Yeah.
So
Where you start is that business impact analysis.
yep.
So I just
For
want to point out
sure.
it's funny that you call me out on that, Evan, because I've been very hard on people with that distinction in the past, doing assessments and such. So I just went and made that mistake, which I think I laugh at myself because of that.
You shouldn't have
Because
said it was a mistake. That was your opportunity to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
good catch, Evan. I didn't know if you were paying attention."
yeah, totally that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been accused. I don't know how many times I've been accused over the years. And it's funny that people pick up on it, in CISO roles or vCISO roles, any kind of information security leadership role. I've been accused of social engineering the organization. You're trying to socially engineer the company. It's like, yeah, that is actually what I'm trying to do.
Social engineering is just the flip side of leadership. Read How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great social engineering book.
Yep, for sure.
So I added into chat about ready.gov. Seriously, check it out if you're just
Mhm.
starting with disaster recovery. Lots of free information, lots of free templates paid for by our tax dollars. And I'm very glad we have, because so many organizations then wouldn't have that information. They wouldn't know what to do. And you go out to the ready.gov, it'll list different types of events and what to do specifically with those events. It gives you a template for building a business impact analysis, different scenarios to consider. This is where we highly recommend getting outside of the textbook and looking for other resources.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is actually ready.gov is one of the few government resources I actually like. To be honest, I'm pretty critical, I think, of government stuff, as we all should be, I think. But yeah, the ready.gov is a great place. I've used those resources a lot.
US government, we should clarify you're not talking about Mexican government,
No, I'm
right?
talking about the Mexican government too, but not as much. I mean, show me one government. I mean, that's the thing about, I think I've learned a lot about perspective, the value of
Mhm.
perspective, and I think of all the errors, the worst decisions I've made in information security in my career, and the worst mistakes I've made in life usually come from decisions I've made with shitty context. or no context. And so when you realize that, you take into account other people's perspectives. And one of the things I've learned, and this really comes into play too with disaster recovery and business impact analysis and all of this, is those other perspectives provide context, which I think helps you to make those better decisions. And I wish I would have learned that earlier in my career. What I don't want is the same perspective all the time. Right? I don't want yes men. This happened. Same thing. It goes for business leadership. It goes for disaster recovery, because it's those things that you didn't see, you didn't have that perspective, that end up kind of biting you in the ass. So
Yep.
communications becomes really, really big. And communications isn't a thing for everybody, right? I need to point that out. Like, not everybody was built to be a CISO.
No.
You know, some people, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? A CISO requires a lot of different skills. It's not better skills, it's just different skills. But you ask a lot of people that are getting into this industry, you know, what do you want to do? What do you want to be, you know, when you grow up? And like, I want to be a CISO. It's like, why the hell would you want that?
You realize it's working with legal, it's working with finance. So if you're not a good accountant, you might not do well as a CISO.
Right.
So it's just, if you look at the cybersecurity or the CISO mind map that's been around for a few years and they keep it up to date, I mean, it's huge, all the
Yeah.
different areas. So you're dead on right, Evan.
Yeah. So, I mean, if communications isn't like a thing for you, that doesn't mean we don't have a place for you in this industry. You know, there are certain, you know, positions in this industry that don't require exceptional communication skills.
True.
And there's certain things in this field that don't require any technical skills. So if you're not, I hear that a lot, people, you know, transitioning into this industry who don't have tech skills. Oh, I'm not technical enough. I don't have a tech background. Big deal. There's lots of things we can do without tech backgrounds, man.
Exactly. Check out Helen Patton on LinkedIn. She has a whole talk around that. Anyway.
Cool. That's awesome. But I think that's
So,
the biggest thing with disaster recovery is getting out of your office, walking around, getting perspectives, hearing things, understanding how the business works, understanding how your IT systems support these business processes. So that business impact analysis is critical. If you can come, and you don't have to overthink it when you talk about recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives, maximum tolerable downtime, all that crap, it's important. But it doesn't have to be scientific. It doesn't have to be perfect. Who would ever expect your first disaster recovery plan to be any good?
well, that's
It's
why
a
you test it.
maturation. Yeah, it's a maturation process. The first one is going to be crap.
But you
Don't
exactly
let that
build it
stop you.
over time. Building it over time, understanding. But part of the challenge that I found working with the business is that operating units may have their own perspective compared to the finance area. Everyone's going to say, my application is the most important. You know, what do we need to bring up first? Well, whatever I need to do my job. Going into those executives and saying, I'm sorry, dude, you're just not that important. You're going to wait. Yeah, it hurts their ego, but it's part of the
Yeah,
reality. We can't bring everything up at once. So understanding what is most critical to the organization. This gets back to, if you're looking at NIST CSF, first thing, you know, after governance, they have the identifying what is most important to the business, not to cybersecurity. And to do that, you need to talk with them, get them to make those business decisions as to what is most critical. And sometimes, again, getting back to quantifying it, can you equate to, if this system is down, this application is down, how much will it cost us? Yeah, and of course the question is, when is it down? Yeah,
right.
it'll on Friday night at 11 p.m. It may not make a difference. And for those
Yeah,
who are not sure, we're recording this on the 2nd of July, and Friday will be the 4th of July, where no
that's
one's
right.
going to be really trying to do much work, you know. So perfect time to practice your BCP.
4th of July. Yeah, that's not really a thing down here in Mexico. So
Uh-huh.
I'll be working on Friday. If you guys need anything,
Uh,
just let me know. like PowerPoint slides created, or I don't know,
Yes.
bamboo shoots under your fingernails, anything like that.
Speaking of bamboo shoots, so what do learners need to know about? I'm reading the page, protecting hard drives and RAID. Is this still a thing? I remember working on RAID 20 years ago.
Right.
I haven't touched it in years.
It is still a thing, but it's not as much of a thing, right? I mean, the things that are most likely to fail in your environment are things that have moving parts, right? So your old hard drives, your old magnetic hard drives, that was it was a spinning platter with a head that read things off that platter. Today we've transitioned a lot more to SSDs, kind of throughout. So there's, I think, less reliance on RAID, but it's still important, right?
Yeah.
You could still have physical damage to an SSD drive and need to recover it.
True.
There was a question early in the session about RAID from VM Ash. He says, I have some questions about RAID, mainly how do you side window select the different RAID models? And can you provide some examples on which one model is preferred over the other? She's trying to understand, or he or she, I'm not sure. They're trying to understand what the kind of questions they would ask on the test about RAID.
I think they'll primarily just give you examples or characteristics about different RAID arrays, and then you have to choose which RAID array fits it. So like they might say something like, which, RAID array gives you the highest performance, but no resilience, something like that, right? And so you should know that would be RAID 0. Or what is RAID 10? And they might give you a list of like striping with parity and just striping, or striping with parity and mirroring, or whatever, and then you'd have to pick things out. I think it's more noting the characteristics.
Uh,
And knowing what does that parity mean.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the check, if you will.
Yeah, they finally took RAID 3 and 4 out of the equation, so I was happy to see that. Those were so I mean, they weren't even commercially viable.
And for most certifications, they tend to be operating system agnostic. So they're not going to ask, how do you do something on a
Sure.
Windows operating system? It's going to be generalized across different operating systems because most of them work very similarly.
Yeah, good point. Good question, though.
Yeah, very good. What other questions do learners have? Please put them in chat. Now's your chance.
Chickadee chat. Yeah, and then I'll be releasing chapter 19. I'm planning on recording it after sometime this evening, and then we'll get that posted probably tomorrow. So it will be posted before the holiday, but I was hoping to get it done earlier. But man, it's a lot of PowerPointing.
Yep. Other things I'm looking at too from the book, talking about trusted recovery, different types, manual versus automated with undue loss. Yeah, you should always assume when you are having to recover, what amount of loss are you willing to sustain as a part of it? Quite often there will be an amount, and that's part of that decision process as a part of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one ever saves things on their local hard drive, and then hard drives or laptops get lost, stolen, destroyed. And then they're like, but they did not leverage a OneDrive, SharePoint, or Google Drive, or name your poison.
But that's all right, Ron. It was password protected.
It's still gone though.
Oh,
The
it's
data.
password protected. Did I get any bonus points for that?
So we are covering some material that it's bringing up material that we already looked at previously in the sessions. So recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives,
Yep.
and such. So it is going to start tying those concepts together here, saying, when you go through and you're doing recoveries, this was your objective of you're going to do it, and you'll probably be asked questions related to that. So just it'll hopefully reinforce that for you. here. One of the things that I did want to bring up, because I did see this on mine, was sites, cold sites, hot sites, and such, warm sites as well, and the differences between those and where those are going to hit. So, any thoughts on those, or any good way to recognize those?
So
Again, it should all be driven by BIA. That's why that's such a critical piece. Anytime somebody's written a disaster recovery plan and it's not supported by a business impact analysis, it's like it's worthless.
And to understand the different types of sites, cold meaning there's nothing there. Warm meaning there's a few things. There may be like some network infrastructure, but you may not have all of the servers you need, or think about it. Since many organizations now have so many resources in the cloud, but let's just say your office building is destroyed or you can't go there and you need to work from an alternate facility. And we saw this with the pandemic, and actually just saw it again this year as so many organizations had to return to office. And it was just everything in reverse, because working with a large organization that had RTO, and they had none of the infrastructure up to date from 5 years ago. They pretty much just left, and everyone worked from home for 5 years. And then executives said, okay, everyone back. And poor IT then were scrambling. So warm, they still had some network, but were the switches and routers updated? Could they handle the workload? These were, again, a long time ago. Hot, meaning you can 100% fail over. Mobile, meaning you can bring in, and you can look these up, 18-wheel tractor trailers with IT infrastructure. Of course, expensive. Mutual assistant agreements, reciprocal agreements. Actually, I've done this in the past when I've worked with state government, working with a university, where if something happened to a state government building, we could take over a university facility, because classrooms are great facilities to recover, but you require that pre-done agreement, often legal.
Yeah. Well, and this, you'd mentioned, Ron, too, about, how everybody thinks that their stuff is the most important stuff. And so when you're doing a business impact analysis, if you're not checking it off against reality on the front end, and when doing that business impact analysis, this is another great opportunity to revisit it again. Because when you've called out recovery time objectives that require a hot site, that require, levels of redundancy and clustering and whatever other fault tolerance stuff, all that stuff costs money, right? So, for us to meet the recovery time objective for this application and blah, 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 hypothetically, it's going to cost $1 million a year. So then you can go back and revisit, and they're like, that system doesn't even make us $1 million a year. Okay, well then great. Maybe our recovery time objective is because we all think our stuff's the most important, but that's maybe an opportunity to adjust it.
And having SLAs in place with your vendors as well. Many have what's known as the 5 nines, 99.9999% uptime. But keep in mind, that
cut through the
still
marketing
means
bullshit, though.
yes, that still means they can be down for like 5 to 20 hours every year, and they get to pick those 5 to 20 hours.
Yeah.
Like, you can be on a critical business call, and your internet service provider could decide, oh, we're going to be out for 3 hours in the middle of the day. That happened to me last week.
Oh, shoot. That sucks.
So fortunately, I had my phone as backup. Anyway, always have a backup.
There's some discussion in chat about backing up your third parties or trusting third parties to do backups. Yeah, absolutely verify, but also look at that data. Is it something that you can rely on them to back up? Or is it something that you want to have your own backups of? And that's, once again, going back to your business impact analysis and just in general, do you guys trust that organization to back up that information for you? What does their backup look like? Do you need something more than that? Also, are they testing it at all? Is a big piece. To go back to the 5 nines aspect, say, for instance, if it's email, these days, can you live without email for more than an hour or so?
Yes.
That might be questionable. I mean, I could, but maybe not.
I could live without it forever. Probably live better, Brian.
Yeah, I'm not gonna argue that one. But if you are running an e-commerce business, can your website be down for an hour? Two very different things and two different, you have to look at those both separately in terms of what you're looking at. Do you need a backup at, say, if you're using AWS, do you need a backup over in Azure to cut over to you if needed, or whatever hosting service you want to use on that one. So
And then what
Yeah,
type of backup?
that's a great point too, because that's part of third party due diligence, right?
Exactly.
When you onboard third parties, these are questions you're supposed to be asking them. So, and that's another part of why that business impact analysis is so core to these things, because I wouldn't know what to demand from, my vendors or third party providers if I don't know that stuff going into it. Right. This particular application is so critical. I need these types of RTOs. I need this type of service level agreement. And that would like prove it to me. Because you're probably on those critical services, you're probably paying a lot of money for it anyway. So in that paying so much money, I mean, you should get the service.
And then continual confirmation. When you initially sign with them, of course, they're going to tell you whatever they can to get you to sign on the bottom line. When was the last time you verified with them? How are they backing up? When was the last time they tested? And then ask them to prove it. And if they say, well, we have a SOC 2.
sorry, that's
You laughed.
I have feelings on SOC 2s, but
We all have feelings on SOC 2s.
that's
But
a
you've
whole
heard
other
that
subject.
response,
Of course,
from the
yeah,
vendor. So
yeah.
we don't make this stuff up, folks.
Oh no.
No.
Sadly, I wish we did. I wish some of this was made up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, some service providers only back up themselves. They'll do whatever the contract says. So this is why
Well,
we
at
need
least
to
they'll
work with
say they'll do
attorneys.
whatever the contract says. You have to,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Verify. But yes. Yeah. What do you do if you found out they're not doing what the contract says? Do you have ways of holding them accountable? So often, and this is a challenge we see with many cloud service providers, is that once you're in with them, you can't move away. Yeah, we have all that tech debt. So you realize they're not in compliance and they're like, oh yeah, what you going to do about it? The big ones will often play that game.
Microsoft would never do that.
So getting off on a slight tangent on this one. So I do a lot of PCI work and was talking to an organization about Zoom. They're like, yeah, Zoom's PCI compliant. I'm like, are they? Like, are they really? Like, and then you look at it, Zoom isn't PCI compliant. A
No,
certain part of Zoom is PCI compliant. That's this total separate add-in for Zoom. And they're like, oh, you mean going from like what we thought we had to this other big, huge compliance requirement just because of Zoom? Yeah, just because of Zoom, it brings your whole entire network into scope. Which if anybody else is PCI, they'll know what I'm talking about. But
yes.
it's a pain. It's that one little thing, and that's the exact same thing. You can't, when they say that they are something, you have to look further into that and make sure it's what you're looking for is what they're actually saying.
Situational awareness.
Also, read your contracts and your SLAs because a lot of times they're telling you that they're going to do something. And once they realize that you're not going to ask them for it, they're not going to do it for you, like reports and such.
And if you're
Before
not
you
going to read the SLA, get a Kevin. Kevin's my business wife. He reads SLAs.
Read the
I've never read an
contract,
SLA.
read policies. Just
Yeah.
have them put it into PowerPoint for you, Evan.
God.
Like that your business wife is inclusive.
Oh yeah, definitely. Kevin's the when people say, they ask me, give me some advice for starting a business, or running a business. And number one is to commit, either do it or don't. Because I think the thing you don't want to have is someday you get older and question, what if I would have done that? That I would rather have tried and failed than have the regret. And the second thing is get a Kevin. Kevin is the person who does the stuff that I don't do. He's never lied to me once in 15 years of doing work together. Yeah, it's a love-hate relationship for sure. Some days, I want to stab Kevin. Some days I want to hug Kevin. But yeah, having a Kevin is an amazing part. But the same thing when you're building teams, right? You need to build teams that complement each other. Having teams that mesh well together, all brought together by, actually I'm finishing up chapter 19 right now with the ethical thing, the things that you can't teach people, we call them the intangibles. What makes Kevin the most valuable person in business for me is his ethics, his integrity. It also just happens to help that he likes reading contracts. I hate reading contracts. He likes golf. I hate golf. Yeah, that's Kevin.
So what's the difference between recovery and restoration? You see that in the book.
Good point.
Is there a difference? I'm assuming there
Yes.
is. Maybe there's not,
Yes, there is.
So which one involves the business? Which one is more IT?
I think they both involve the business. Recovery is getting the system back, getting some semblance of functionality back. So it's working again, so it's recovered. Whereas restoration is getting the system back to a complete, its pristine self again.
So
think of it like a building, like recovering a building versus, if a building was hit by a hurricane, recovery would be, getting it so it's livable again, whatever, so it's functional. Restoration would be putting everything back to the way it was. Getting all those restoration experts in to fix all the windows and all that stuff. Yeah.
We got quiet.
At
So
least
now
that's how
looking
I
at the
understand it.
Yeah, no,
That's what AI says.
Face palm. So if folks are not realizing, A, you got to work with the business, B, test. So I'm now going through the part on different testing. Yeah. How often should we test our DRBCP?
yearly at least, if not more.
Yeah, yearly, and whenever there's a significant change in the business. You've acquired somebody, you've been acquired, you've started a new business unit, a new significant new revenue stream in the business, you've migrated to, upgraded, wholesale upgrade of technology, stuff like that. Significant changes to the business should require a test.
So I'm seeing answers in chat annually. The problem is I test it tomorrow and then something doesn't work next week. I won't figure it out until July 2026. So I'm going to recommend as continual as possible. Now you won't be able to do, the full interruption test, or potentially could be doing parallel tests quarterly. Again, maybe this is something you add into your contract, into your SLA with your service providers. But at the very least, you could be doing tabletops, walkthroughs, and simulations very often. I'll often just do it as part of regular meetings, just as, okay, we got extra 10 minutes. Let's practice.
Yeah,
And
good point.
great way just to see where those gaps are. You won't be able to test all of the different technical elements, but you can at least ask the questions. When was the last time or we actually saw, or are we prepared for a power outage? And this ties back into some of the physical security, having duplicate channels for power, for communications.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Main parts.
Yeah. If you can get to that part where you get into the muscle memory,
Yep.
world, that's why, even, professional athletes, practice all the time.
Yep.
And most of their practice, when you watch their drills, it's the fundamental drills that you were doing in high school, that you're doing in junior high school, even. And they do that because they understand the importance of the fundamentals, the basics. And that's the same thing with information security. It's the same thing with DRP. When you get to that point where it's muscle memory, then when the incident happens, it's like, it just happened, it's still going to cause damage, but it's about risk. It's about risk management, right? Not risk elimination.
I'm putting into chat for those who are, Randy Pausch did the last lecture, Carnegie Mellon professor, talks about fundamentals. So if you don't believe us, here's a good quote.
How does Carnegie Mellon like compare to like watermelon?
Juicier.
It's juicier. Got to go to the store and find myself one of these Carnegie Mellons.
There you go.
These are dad jokes. This is what happens when you become 54 with 5 kids and 10 grandkids.
Wow. Yep. And someone, John, you mentioned train how you fight, fight how you train. Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
it. That's it. I mean, and then you get to this point where it's like all this stuff is common sense, you know, to how you do what you do. And I made that point in the lesson, you know, that was late, about how we had the Hurricane Lydia come through here in 2023, which is a Category 4 hurricane. I'd never been through a hurricane before. And when I told friends back that have lived in hurricanes before, they're like, well, did you leave? I'm like, no. Like, holy crap, you stayed through it. I was like, yeah, it was crazy. But with the disaster recovery sort of mentality and mindset, I was already prepared. Even though I'd never been through a hurricane before, I had a power generator. I had a manual transfer switch that I had installed. I had 14 circuits on power. I already knew what we were going to do when the hurricane hit. I had prepared, you know, ample supplies of water prior to the hurricane in case we couldn't get to clean water. When the hurricane hit, we were going to stay here, and then if there was any danger to, you know, our physical safety, we had a room that we are going to go to on the bottom floor, all concrete, no windows. So it's back to that muscle memory thing. And that's the cool thing about information security. You really can't separate information security in business from life. It's all integrated today, right? So these skills that you create as being a CISSP or being a really good security person are life skills. These are all life skills. And I think the more we can preach that to the business, I think, you know, hopefully the more they'll embrace it.
So to back you up on that one, Evan, I was in Florida for a hurricane. Wow, 10-ish years or so ago now. I happened to be at Disney World, and it was
Oh,
crazy to
wow.
see what Disney did to prepare
Oh,
for that.
man. I bet you they
What?
were dialed in.
Oh man, it was crazy. Like the day, so it came through, like we got hit with the eye around 2 o'clock in the morning. And by when you could then go out when they lifted, you know, maybe around 8 o'clock in the morning is when you could go out. They already had crews everywhere cleaning everything up. And granted, where we were, we weren't hit with like the bad part of it. It
Right.
was significantly less powerful, but it was still like it was crazy wind and rain for like 8 hours that we got.
Right.
And but it was just to see that, to see all of the infrastructure that they had a whole area where like you could see it from the monorail, where they just had vehicles lined up and everything ready to go to dispatch
Right.
to different areas. And like they had food and water and all of that. Like they were handing out bottled water and like they had prepackaged food for the guests and such there. It was crazy. What
That's
they
so cool.
they do it all the time. It's crazy. It was a
Well,
crazy to see.
and here we had so if you Google Hurricane Lydia, it's LIDIA in 2023. Coincidentally, my daughter's name, who lives with us, her name is Lydia, but with a Y, right? So I had a lot of jokes about that. But when you watch the path of this hurricane, right, it completely looked like it was going to be going out further into the Pacific. And then if you see that path, you know, if you look at like the Wikipedia page about that hurricane, it curled right back.
Wow.
And if you see the little like dip there, that's Puerto Vallarta, and it hit like right here. But, you know, going back to the important in this muscle memory thing and the importance of things like situational awareness, I was watching it. Even though it looked like it wasn't going to hit here, you still pay attention. It's like, oh, it's okay. Well, it might be coming this way, but maybe we want to go out and get some water, get some gas for the generator. Whereas, and when you, and I don't like comparing myself, but if you compare this to like businesses, right? When it hit here, we were the only house, and there's lots of houses, you know, around here. We were the only house that had power after the hurricane. So I had a whole bunch of my neighbors coming over and plugging in their cell phones and everything like that, which was cool because not only during a disaster, if you can take care of your shit well, now you make yourself available to help other people. And so we had the opportunity to go and get a chainsaw and start cutting down trees for the, you know, for people and, you know, helping around, which then made you, you know, part of this community. It helped your reputation, all that stuff. But the point is that preparation is priceless. And talking about, you know, the panic, if you're planned, and none of this was documented, right? The level of documentation typically is commensurate with the number of people that are going to be involved and the complexity of the recovery. You know, and I'll say that again, the level of documentation is typically commensurate with the number of people that are involved and the complexity in the recovery. So if you have a really simple recovery and I'm the only one involved, it doesn't even necessarily need to be documented. So the disaster recovery plan here at home was in my head, right? And I'd already accounted for knowing how Lydia is going to react. Lydia was my primary, like, this is the one that's going to go panic, right? So what am I going to tell her, right? So we get her down to where we're safe and she's freaking out like we expected her to do. And I sat down, I'm like, just think about this and hold on a second. We're going to get through this. And when we do get through this, think about the story you have to tell. How many people do you know that have been through a Category 4 hurricane? How many people have been resilient? Think about how much better you're going to feel about yourself. I mean, just all these positive things. And she instantly kind of went, oh, all right. So and I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying that over the years, I've done enough disaster recovery work and wanted to do things the right way all the way through, that you start to build these life skills that you can take to other parts of your life, not just the company that you work for or the company that you consult for, but at home where it matters kind of more than anything else, right? Saving my kids, my family. So that's why I take this stuff, you know, really seriously. I think the passion about it is you can see the people component. This isn't just about information. It's not just about security. I mean, nobody would give a shit if nobody suffered. But the fact of the matter is, when we lose information, when we do have disasters, somebody suffers. And if we can be that person that can step in and I think minimize the suffering, hell yeah. You don't even have to pay me for this shit. I just preached right there. And I think the reason why I was preaching really quick is because I have to go pee really quick. So I'll be right back.
Great time to transition, if y'all don't mind, to chapter 19, talking about investigations and ethics and understanding about discovery. Unless you got something else, Brian, you want to make sure we cover.
I want to stress the ethics part of this.
Ooh.
This is so extremely testable. I would not be
Yes.
surprised if this is a requirement on everybody's test that there's ethics questions. So
Yes.
just make sure you guys know this and you guys are very familiar with it.
Putting in the YouTube chat, the ISC2 statement of ethics. So if you have you get your CISSP, I think you actually still need to sign saying you agree to abide by these ethics.
You do.
So still
And
there.
this is why when people, and it happens every year in Discord, they post like, here's a copy of the book, a PDF copy of the book. No, because that's against the ethics of the CISSP and ISC. So that's why we
Also
do
against copyright law, but
That's very true.
It's only a
which
crime if you get caught, right?
right? Well, that's why we have ethics. Yeah. No, it's great point. Yeah, and we hold each other accountable. I can't tell you how many times I've seen over the last couple of decades where someone creates a blog that is plagiarized from a source and then they blast it out to LinkedIn and they get 100 likes and someone figures it out and then calls them out on it. And it ain't pretty, let me tell you. So when it comes back to AI, I actually use a simple rule is being able to defend whatever you are writing, whatever you are doing. Can you defend it? Is it good? And then another thing about ethics, it's good to have accountability partners. That if you're even coming close to that line, they should let you know. You shouldn't even come close to the line. It can be sometimes very tempting. Has this ever happened to y'all? You're just wandering around a website and you find like a big problem, vulnerability. What do you do about that? I'm curious, what would you do? This is like that TV show. What would you do? You realize that they are, completely vulnerable because they're still using SSL.
Yeah, is there a way that you can reach out to the owners of that website and say, hey, check this out. This is what we're seeing, or I'm seeing.
All websites should have, yeah, you go look at the contact information. Yeah, I've had
Wow.
that happen. So, and I've done that, and it's not, please hire me as your consultant and I will help you fix it. That again, on the edge of ethics, we won't go there, but it's here's the problem, here's the reason why. We're just letting you know out of ethical communications.
Yes. And
So,
and don't request payment for it either.
no, nope. So it comes back to if you see something, say something. You're gonna add.
I was just gonna say I've been in situations where people have asked me about that, saying, "Hey, someone's reached out about this vulnerability on our website, and they pointed it out, and they said that they'd like if they could get some sort of payment or something for finding it, or something along those lines." It's like, did you guys know about this already? And they're like, "Yeah, we knew about it already." And it's like, okay, well, you guys knew about it already, just that's up to you guys how you guys handle it. But my recommendation would be is there's no need to coordinate or communicate with that person.
Yeah, we call that ethical disclosure, right?
Yep, that was the word I was thinking of. Thank you, Evan.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, and we find that all the time, and as part of our own testing, I've like one of the projects I'm working on right now is Project Broken Mirror, which is essentially trying to map the attack surface of the United States, right? And, some of that is passive data, some of that's active. And the difference between passive is you're accessing data repositories that you're not scanning the systems, you're not hitting them directly, right? So that's the passive piece. But there also has to be an active piece to this, right? And so you ask the question, well, is scanning a system that you don't own and you haven't received permission to scan, is that ethical? It's a great question. And it's one I think it's debatable. Is it illegal? No, it's not illegal. It's only illegal if you bypass security controls, you exploit something, or you degrade service. That's what makes it illegal. On the ethics part, that's the piece where it's like, well, the purpose and the reason behind this is to help secure the United States. You could justify ethically, I think, in the discussions I've had with other security professionals, but that's another thing. Sometimes in ethics, you have to seek wise counsel. Seek others. I love how you pointed out, Ron, about having other people hold you accountable. We're all humans, and we're all susceptible to making mistakes. One of the things I've learned is the value of transparency, meaning sharing with other people what my mission is, why I'm here, why I do what I do. So then when somebody says, well, you said you do this, but you did that. It's like, oh shit. There's that perspective again that I didn't have. Thanks for sharing. You're right. I might've missed up on that one. Yeah. Having that transparency, having, ethics is a team sport, A lot of times in my mind, I think what I'm doing is completely ethical. And then somebody points out where there's a flaw in my logic. It's like a bug in my code.
Yep.
You've mentioned this before, Evan, and immediately when you talk about scanning, networks without permission, it brings to mind the Electronics Communication Privacy Act and the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. For me, I try to stay
Which
out
was
of them
written in
people's
what year?
jails. Oh gosh.
1986.
ChatGPT. 86?
Yeah. It's
Wow.
been amended multiple times. But yeah, that shows you how far behind our legal community is from what we're actually doing every day. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
You didn't interrupt me. That's what it made me think of, because I'm a risk averse person. And, I would be completely hesitant to do that. But, I wonder if your train of thought comes from just being an old school, person that likes to hack, like you said, hacking is not a bad word. Those are attackers, not hackers. So I wonder if that's
Right.
where your philosophy kind of ranges from.
I think some of it's that, but if we don't take risks, then we just continue to do the status quo. Risk takers are the ones who fix things.
Mm.
The non-risk takers just live with it broken. And so I think, in my approach to things, when you see things that are broken, if it's motivating enough, if it irritates me enough, well, then we got to do something about it. We have to fix it. And so, yes, there's definitely risk involved because you're doing something that nobody else has done yet. Or maybe they're doing it, but you just don't know about it. So if you start doing it yourself, sometimes those people come out of the woodwork because they're doing similar things. But yeah, the irritation is the fact that, because I've had this discussion with people at CISA and, state and local governments, because that's where I'm focusing most of my work. Who gave you authorization to do this is what I get a lot. And I'm like, number one, I don't need authorization legally. And in my opinion, it's kind of a stupid question because do you ask the same question from the attackers who already have our attack surface? They already know this. I'm just trying to make it known to you and the rest of the public, in this, and that's going to be the difficult thing is once you get it done, it's like, what's responsible disclosure on this? Because the point of disclosing it is not to shame people. I know enough state and local government folks. They're great people. I think they're resource strapped. There's lots of, different problems and politics and all the bullshit. And rather than shame them, what I prefer to do is disclose these things in a way that builds their case, that justifies their value, that we need to focus on this more. When you think about the lack of accountability, see, I'm preaching again, but when you think about the lack of accountability in the information security industry, I think there's four kind of main reasons why it is the way it is. Number one is it doesn't hurt enough. People aren't suffering enough to a level that it requires some action. The pain that you feel is typically spread out across a large population of people. And it's happened, in the 30 years in this industry, it's happened bit by bit over 30 years. We didn't get here overnight, but we continued to make a series of compromises. And people, I think, kind of forgot what it was like before we got breach notices in the mail all the damn time. So that's one. I think the second reason is it's not an election issue. When you look at the top, when you talk about laws, the reason why, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986 is what is the primary prosecutorial law that we use in this country. And the reason why we haven't come up with something new is because there's no motivation for elected officials to do that. Elected officials, their sole purpose is to get reelected. So if you want this to change, you have to make this an election issue at some level. The third thing is the legal community. The legal community likes it the way it is, to be honest. I mean, I've talked to enough lawyers, seen enough of them work behind the scenes. Every time there's a breach, there's a civil suit, there's a class action, $100 million payout, lawyers get 35%. It's a huge moneymaker for them. Mm-hmm. Why do they want to change it? They don't. And I think the fourth reason is, what was the fourth reason? I can't remember, but it's these types of things that I think we need to overcome on a larger scale, right? So when you talk about pain, it's coming. I mean, I'm not one of those prepper doomsday conspiracy theory things. I'm a logic guy. Logically, you see it coming. The pain that's going to exceed what people are going to be willing to tolerate, specifically things in critical infrastructure. Power supply, the power grid, water supply, food supply. I mean, you name it. It's in pretty bad shape for lots of reasons. Those. So if we can elevate the visibility of this to where this is what it looks like. It's blinking red right now, and you can't deny it. The methodology that you used is, all open source, that, you can go validate this yourself. Because I did this all came from we do a lot of posturing in our industry, and I was with a bunch of other security people, and one of them was bragging about how he had consulted the last 4 presidential administrations on how to secure critical infrastructure. And I said, without thinking, I said, that's awesome. Has the security of critical infrastructure gotten any better since you started consulting presidents? To then led to a challenge, like, what would you do? And I'm like, well, I would map the attack surface of the entire United States, and then I would find anything that's got single factor authentication. I'd either shut it off or secure it with multi-factor. Because you have to start with 2 things. You can't give people like NIST, CSF and say, here, do that. They're
So I did an
overwhelmed.
exercise like that here in the state of Nebraska, where we did that
Yeah.
brainstorming, and we came back with, well, what if there's a power outage? Or multiple power outages.
Right.
So this gets back to understanding what are those root causes, identifying them and being able to, but I like your point about attack surface. That's more on the cyber side, both
Right.
accidental and malicious. It's not always just about attacks. I've seen more outages because of, oops, I didn't mean to
Well, on the
unplug
oops
that.
thing, that's one. The good thing about those is they're typically isolated, and they're typically quick to troubleshoot because you knew what happened, and whatever. It's this the fact that, and the reason why it's those 2 things is the most common method into the infrastructure is through a system that's sitting on the internet that's secured with single factor authentication. It's trivial to get into a lot of these places. And so I started with counties. So 3,044 counties in the United States, and I did the attack surface of all of those because I wanted to point out to CISA, like, why the hell aren't you guys doing this? And they said, and one of their comebacks was, it's too expensive. Well, I did it with 6 VPSs. VPS is a virtual private server, and it cost me $250. So you can't use that as an excuse. And so,
was it money expense or political expense?
Who cares? That's the thing, right? It's like, sometimes I think us as the community, we just got to take the bull by the horns and do this. We can't wait for the elected officials to get their shit together. We have to do it. So I started with counties because I could put them on a map. I could create a nice visual, and I could color code all the counties based on, what their attack surface looked like. And the coolest thing about everybody in the public that I had showed it to, because it was just a proof of concept, it was, why is my county red? Why is my county orange? Why is my county blue? Why is my county green? And it was great conversations because they'd never seen anything like it. And they were asking questions that are really relevant to what we're trying to do. Like, your county's red because, why don't you ask your county officials why it's red? Yeah, I can give you the technical details, but what I need you to do is get involved. I need you to start asking these questions. I need you to start making this an election issue and make it a life skill, right? I'm not asking, what we're seeking is not for everybody to drop everything, forget about immigration, forget about the economy, forget about everything, and just focus on cybersecurity. That's not what I'm saying, but make it a risk like the others. Otherwise, we just, kind of fly ignorant. Anyway, I preached a lot about that, but the point was the ethics behind it. The point is the involvement, I think the communication. You need all that stuff if you want disaster recovery to go well. Yeah, and ethics, there's lots of ethical questions that we face all the time if you really sit and think about it on what you're doing, why you're doing it. How many times have you been in a project where they've asked you to do something and you've never done it before, but you didn't say you never did it before. You took on the project. You know, it maybe didn't go well. There's nothing wrong with taking on this project you've never done before, but disclose that you've never done this project before. I'm going to use this as a learning opportunity because hopefully you've built enough trust and credibility with the client that they're still going to hire you to do the work.
Well, sometimes you can correlate past experience. I mean, that's actually, I think, the challenge we see with imposter syndrome. People will say, well, I haven't done that exact work, so I don't know if I can do it. But they've done so much similar and equivalent that can be brought in, which actually brings in a great outside perspective, reducing bias for those of us who have done it 100 times and think we know it all and just doing it with muscle memory. So sometimes there's having that balance within the team of those with the experience and those who don't. But yeah, when you see something, be upfront and honest with folks about it, because we're all in the same big boat together. We're just trying to keep each other, keep our organizations, keep our communities safe is really what it comes down to. So,
and you see some of the unethical, I mean, what are some examples of unethical behavior that you see in the industry now,
well, often,
regularly, in the past?
not to throw vendors under the bus, but, hey, buy my stuff and it'll solve all your problems. I've actually had a vendor say that to me. And my question was, good, what are my problems? Uh, again, describing what that problem is and realizing how do we leverage the technical solutions? So many organizations, they buy the technology without understanding the people or the process, or being able to have the people who can run the technology, and they plug it in. And why am why am I still being breached? Why am I not 100% secure? Well, you never took the time to configure, adapt it to meet your mission requirements.
Well,
So
there's no such thing as 100% secure. I mean,
no, right.
being
That too.
transparent with customers. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been lots of times when I've been invited to things and not been re-invited because you told them the truth.
Right. It's being bold, and knowing how to do it sometimes diplomatically. And you
Yeah,
watch the
I
really
suck at that.
the really good folks. I love watching them because they'll hand someone their ass and the person will never realize it. But those of us who are watching are like laughing because it's like, yeah, you just got pwned and they won't,
Well,
they don't know.
is it ethical to sell a customer a product that you know is not in their best interest, that you know
Yeah.
doesn't do what you said it's going to do, that they're not capable of using it,
Yeah.
that's not the best spend of their next information security dollar?
Yeah.
That's the part I struggle with because we have, ethics is like so important. There's three things you need if you want to be, get customers: trust, credibility, and likability.
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is, this industry is a service industry. It is not a product industry. We are here to serve. And who do we serve? We serve our customers. And through our customers, we serve the people that they have as customers. Ultimately, it's their information, right? It's their credit card data. It's their social security numbers. It's their DNA. It's their whatever. And I think having that ethical, moral compass, it also gives you this boldness to say the things because you know that that's the way this works. I think it's unethical to, sell a customer something, and this might be hard for people to, reconcile. But if you sell a customer something that they don't need, the rule at FRSecure is I'll run you over with my truck.
Virtually.
Well, no, I got a truck. I'll drive up there. I'll even rent one, but I've never had to do it because that's
Right.
how seriously we take it. Right.
Right.
If a customer is asking for a penetration test and you know that you don't need a penetration test.
Right.
You need a vulnerability scan or an asset inventory. I mean, you need something much more basic right now, even though we can make
But
more
I read in
money
the
on
in-flight
this.
magazine that we need pen tests.
Right.
And BCI requires it annually,
but that's the ethical part, right? If you being the professional that you are and we are, and the same thing I think of what ISC squared is driving towards is doing what's in the best interest of your customers, of the community, of the customers. And that's it. That's what it comes down to. You know, it's not rocket science, but it does take certain intangibles, certain integrity that I think some people just sadly don't have. And
And
then it comes down to like, should we call them out? Like I'm thinking about it.
it's, again, how to do it so people will listen. And that's the art of communications,
True.
art of influence. So speaking of ethics, I'm going to actually need to jump, and I'm going to throw a bomb in. How do we work with attorneys as a part of evidence gathering? How's that for a segue?
Flipping attorneys.
Talk to law enforcement first.
Well, it
Ooh,
depends.
I love that answer. Anyway, I got to jump. I love the
Yeah.
idea. Talk to us, John, about how do we work with law enforcement, because so many organizations don't prep for that. So anyway, for y'all,
Same.
have a happy and safe Fourth.
Take
Thanks,
care,
Ron.
sir.
Take care.
Law enforcement.
You,
Yeah.
you brought up a really good point about, how or one of the things that I find the most frustrating about working in this industry, especially in, you work for the United States government, NISA and CISA or NIST and CISA, they come out with these, with this policy, hey, this is what you need to do, but they don't tell us how to do it.
Right.
Which I would see kind of borderline runs along being unethical, because you're increasing the risk at that point. But hey, we have this policy, like we're going from Rev 4 to Rev 5 in this special publication 800-35, but now it's 720 controls, and you can't NA any of them. You got to answer all 720 controls.
Right. Well, and a lot of the things, especially coming out of NIST, were written by academics. So, knowing that the source is from an academic standpoint, that's why it lacks the practical application components. In many cases, they've never actually done it. And the process is, you write something and then you put it out for public comment. Um, some people comment, but I think the vast majority of the industry doesn't comment. I don't know how you sort of fix that stuff, but my least favorite thing out of NIST is their guidance on implementing zero trust, because it's just this not the way to do it. I mean, holy crap. You couldn't have made this more complicated, and complexity is the worst enemy of security. So it doesn't even stand ground on like a logic standpoint. Yeah, I don't know if it's, the motive behind it, I think, is good. So I don't know if it's ethical or not ethical. That's a good point. Law enforcement, I've, I don't know how many incidents, say maybe 500. I don't know. Out of 500 incidents, less than 10 times have we called law enforcement in. And the reasons, typically for that is, one, is this a criminal action that's going to stand any chance of being prosecuted? If not, then, law enforcement may not provide a ton of value here. When law enforcement gets involved, now the Constitution gets involved. So now you've got to work somewhat under what's called the color of law, which, you have to watch yourself on that, right? If law enforcement tells you to do something and you go and do it, and it's a violation of the Constitution, you violated the Constitution. Law enforcement, typically from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, has varying levels of expertise. Some jurisdictions have just shit expertise, like terrible. The FBI has definitely upped their game, I think, the last few years, but it was hard to get their attention for a long time. So that's a plus, I think, for going to them on certain stuff. It also, opens it up for disclosure, right? Because now it could potentially become a public matter. There's some things that you don't want to be a public matter. So generally, we've steered clear. Times when we've called law enforcement, even if it wasn't going to be a criminal matter, we would, if we needed, like one I can think of in particular, was we needed log files from the ISP. And so we had, in order to conduct the rest of our investigation on behalf of the client. So we asked the ISP if they would share those things with us, and they wouldn't. So then it's like, okay, do you make the decision, or do we just skip over that part of the investigation, or do we force them to give it to us, which would mean a subpoena? We don't, people don't, me and you don't have subpoena power, right? So that might be another reason to get law enforcement involved. But they get in the way a lot. They slow things down a lot. So the key to working with law enforcement is make sure you establish contacts with law enforcement prior to the incident. So as part of your incident response plan, reach out to local law enforcement, reach out to your local FBI or the closest FBI field office, and start your discussions with them. Get a feel for how they would integrate with your investigation, and what level of expertise they would be drawing from beforehand. Yeah. And lawyers, come on. Lawyers are fun because you can play them a little bit, because they're all thinking about like negligence. We don't want to be negligent. So you can use, like, I'll give you an example. The Blue Cross Blue Shield breach. So that was Anthem, Primera, Excelis. You might remember that the Chinese, I don't know what it was, 25 million health records or some crap like that. So I was conducting, part of the investigation, and it's like, man, seems like a Swiss cheese in this technical environment. So I asked the lawyers, I'm like, I think we might have a big exposure here, because I don't know how many vulnerabilities there are. It seems like it would have been really easy for the attackers to get in, blah, blah, blah. They're like, okay, we need to find out. So then we conducted a vulnerability scan of the entire environment. I don't know, it was like 10, 15,000 hosts. And we score things on a scale of 300 to 850 so that you can understand kind of the relative nature of risk. And when I finished it, I went and, had a conference with the lawyers, and I'm like, it's this, I've never seen this happen on a scan of this scale, but you didn't even make it on the scale. Like, we can't even give you a 300. Like 300 in terms of this perspective, a 300 is like, it's the risk has already happened, right? The events have already happened. It's that level. 850 is like they can't happen sort of thing. So I'm like, that's how bad it is. And they're like, how quick can you fix it? Shit. That many hosts, getting it from 300 up to, while you're still trying to run your business. It was, they ended up paying, I think, $15,000 a week for 14 weeks for me to get that from a 300 to a 710 or something. So you can use lawyers, I think, to motivate, if you understand kind of how they're thinking. But you'll find things like, in your mind, in your perspective, something is completely negligent. Like, there's no excuse for this. This is like totally irresponsible. Whereas a lawyer will always ask, well, how does that compare with everybody else? They always ask that. Evan, in your experience in working with all these other companies, have you seen this before? I'm like, yeah. Do you see it a lot? Yeah. Well, then it's not negligent. You know what I mean? So it's always like this, like, that was the Target breach really frustrated me, because, man, there were so many places all throughout that breach where it was just really shitty. And, they made the final recommendation to the court to not proceed because there was no, evidence of negligence. It was shit.
So
So I'm not a big fan of lawyers.
there was a recent article that came out that said there was I don't know the very specifics, but I believe it was the first UK death in a hospital due to ransomware or malware or something along those lines. Which was a very interesting discussion we had here among our group of they're saying that it was the malware or the ransomware, the threat actor's fault that this person died, or they couldn't get the care that they needed, right? Well, it's like, yeah, but also at the same time, it's the hospital probably wasn't doing what they're supposed to be doing to protect their systems. So the aspect was it should be really on the hospital because they weren't doing what they should have been doing. I don't know the details of it. I don't know the specifics, but that's just kind of the sort of thought process is they weren't doing their part to protect their systems in this. And in this case, should these sorts of systems should have been segregated. There shouldn't what happened shouldn't have been affected by, ransomware or something else somewhere else in the organization. But once again, I don't know the details, so I can't truly speak to that. But that's one of the sort of
And see
thought
that,
process.
and that's the crazy like crap in the legal industry. Because if you're going to use that same standard, like why isn't Microsoft held accountable for their shitty code? I have to use this. I have no choice but to use PowerPoint. But what happens if an attacker compromise and yet all the liability or all the responsibility is on me to make sure that it's patched? It's like, what? Coincidentally, Microsoft, I think, has 300 full-time lawyers that work there.
That's all.
Yeah, so good luck, going up against that. But there's a lot of things I think that what drives things. Oh, that was the fourth thing, by the way, that of why there's no accountability in this industry, and it's money. Truly, it's there's lots of really big players in technology and really big players in information security that make a boatload of money the way things are. If you actually fix things, holy crap, what are we going to do now? So, yeah, it's frustrating because there's plenty of fingers to point everywhere, and it's not that. And that's not the point. The point isn't pointing fingers. It's what are the rules that we can all play by? Like, let's say something like make a law that says if you don't have an asset inventory, you are negligent. That's simple, right? And then watch how many boards of directors, now start doing an asset inventory. It's starting somewhere with defining in binary, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, what's responsible and what's not responsible, so that we can play by the rules. And then it leaves out this constant debate about what's ethical, what's not ethical, what's legal, what's not legal, what's, you know what I mean? We're just kind of spinning our wheels. And we've been doing it, I think, for 30 something years now. I should go get my law degree. Man, I'd have so many enemies. I already have plenty. And that's another thing, like with lawyers, they're very territorial. So, anytime you come off like you are giving legal advice, you have to be clear about the fact that you're not a lawyer. They will come after you if they feel like you're giving legal advice without the qualification to do it. You wonder if that's ever going to come to the security industry.
I'm not a security industry. Don't take my advice or use it at your own risk.
No, that you have to meet specific requirements to do the work.
I would think that, you need to prove something. I mean, isn't that why a lot of us are here, is to get CISSP that they can.
Yeah, but you can make a hell of a killing in this industry without the CISSP.
That is true.
And I think it'd have to be, a CISSP along with some sort of practical display of your qualification. Because that's one of the knocks on CISSP and most certifications. They're great certifications. But what it doesn't teach you is how to actually do it. It's a lot different, you know, when you're out in the field, and it would be cool to see a second part, I think, to the CISSP where it's more of a practitioner's certification. That'd be
It would be
cool.
interesting.
Don't ask me to do it if it has anything to do with PowerPoint. I don't want any part of that crap anymore.
No, we're not doing PowerPoint anymore. We're using AI for that.
Well, that would be the
That's
cool thing too, is if it was practical stuff. You know, the only time I would have to use PowerPoint is when I'm doing those board presentations and things. You know what I mean? Because in the practical, I you know, when I'm actually doing security work, I don't use PowerPoint very often.
When your
I try not to
project
do.
Mira, does it are you tracking like the power grid or anything? Are you looking into that?
Not yet. So we're taking what we learned in the first pass on the counties and trying to make that more live without getting, you know, we don't want to hurt anything. We don't want to, you know, degrade service, none of that stuff. So, you know, it's a fine line between doing that right. I think once we dial that in, then we'll start absorbing other parts of critical infrastructure, probably going at K-12 next, or maybe cities. I don't know. We've had a lot of discussions about that, but we'll also open it up to the public. Because this isn't, you know, for me, right? I don't want any notoriety for it. I don't want any money for it. I don't even want to be like a part of it. It's like you just kind of build it and give it to somebody else. Because if I'm a part of it, then I got to go to meetings. I hate meetings.
And they're gonna want you
So,
to do. They're gonna want you to do PowerPoints at those meetings too.
nope, not doing it. But I think it'll be, you know, giving it over to the community. Like here's the method, here's the way, build the community. And then it gets the community involved and use it as a teaching tool, right? In K-12, in, you know, higher education, here's a practical example. You can certainly, you know, go to the cyber ranges. And those are valuable in their own respect, but why not go live fire? Provide value to the country at the same time.
Is this project publicly viewable by anybody right now?
No. No, that's part of the responsible disclosure thing. There's, you know, a handful of us working on it, and some of the results have been publicly shared, but the method and stuff we want to, and you also have to make sure that, you know, even though we're ethical and stuff, or like to think we are, you know, some of the people in the community that will end up using some of the things we're building may not be. So we have to put, you know, proper checks and balances in that. But if you want to know more, we can talk later. Yeah, it's fun because you feel like you're actually helping, you know.
On that, any other questions in the group chat here of the topics here, or is there anything specific that you might want to hit on for investigations? I'll be honest and say that I know what I read in the book, and I don't really know much more else, so I don't really have any good insight there.
Yeah, investigations. I mean, I always just learned to approach the investigations as though I'm going to have to defend everything that I'm doing. You know, it only takes once, I think, when you get deposed and you don't have answers to certain questions that you know you're supposed to have answers to. You know, usually because you cut corners or something, or you just forgot. That's where that, you know, kind of my number one rule is, if you're going too fast to document everything, you're going too fast, comes from. But I think the book is generally, you know, got pretty good guidance. Obviously, it's not a handbook for how to do forensics. It's not a handbook for how to conduct investigations. You know, because as I was doing that, as I'm actually finishing up that chapter now, there are a lot of rabbit holes you could go down. It's like, oh man, I want to add more here. Like checklists and, all kinds of things you could, add to it. But, um, you don't have to be an incident investigator to be a CISSP. You just kind of need to know the basics of it. And I think the book does a pretty good job of covering those. There's a few places where I think it goes into some kind of irrelevant things, but for generally, it's pretty good. Document everything. And an incident is like the wrong time to learn something. I mean, to not learn something, but like, I've never done this before. So, well, shit, no better time than the present. Some incidents, okay, but you have to have the discernment to know which ones those are, because there are some incidents where it's like, you do not want to do that. You could cause more damage. You could completely taint evidence. You could find yourself in legal trouble.
In the investigation process in the book, it says that the very first thing you should do is assemble a team of competent analysts.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have one on staff, start, reach out to organizations and see if they do, so you can maybe put them on retainer. That helps. Yeah, forensics is, when I first did forensics, it was fun. Now it's so tedious. It's really tedious. Really careful. It's a different mentality for sure. So I don't do forensics anymore. I haven't done forensics for a while. FTK is still out there though. FTK is still the thing. Forensics toolkit.
Yeah, I was going to say forensics toolkit for those who are not aware.
Yeah. What was the shoot, I can't, it shows you how old I am. I can't remember the name of that shoot. They were a company that we always went to when we needed hard drive recoveries, like really
Oh,
big
Kroll?
ones. On Track. It was On Track. Kroll bought On Track. Right. Yep. On Track. Because they had a mic, what do you call that? An electron microscope. I had a tour of, because they were local in Minnesota when I lived there. And man, that was cool. They had a clean room, all this stuff. That was some serious, when that last um space shuttle crashed, they sent the black box to them. That kind of expertise. That's crazy. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. That's the thing, man. Recognize, be honest with yourself, recognize what skills you have, what skills you don't have. And it's okay to not know everything, and rely on somebody to fill those gaps for you. Certainly if you're in an information security leadership position, you need to take inventory of what parts of the team can cover what and what you might need a third party for. Takes a lot of honesty. Like, yeah, I don't want to admit to anybody that I can't code, but you can't code. So there you go. Either learn how to code or get somebody who can.
Because especially in the coding essence, they're going to find out real quick if you can't.
Well, now somebody told me there's this thing called vibe coding.
Yeah, that was mentioned earlier. Yeah, that's a thing now.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that to me. I'm like, what the hell is that? And they're like, well, it's, you use AI to do. I'm like, no shit. That sounds fun.
Depends. I'm not a coder. I probably told the story that I originally started college for coding, computer science, but after the first semester, I knew that I wasn't supposed to be one. Um, so I changed tracks. But it takes a
Yeah.
certain mentality, and I can understand why people would be interested in being like, hey, I need to develop code for something. Oh, I'm gonna just plug it in the system and see what happens with it. Um, you have, like anything else, you need to do a risk assessment on that. And, do you understand what it just output for you? Is it right? Is it calling the right
Right.
information? There's so many security aspects to that, that it gets scary quickly.
Well, that's what I learned when I did research about it after somebody told me about it. And that was kind of the consensus was, vibe coding or using AI, not vibe coding, but using AI um, to help coding uh, for really experienced developers makes them like awesomely awesome, right? But they know where it can fit and where it can't fit, and they don't, you know what I mean? They know what to look for in the output from AI. Yeah, so I think it's probably a good thing, but I wouldn't trust like now if you got somebody who's got like no coding experience that they're going to start going out and I don't know, writing code for customers now or something. That wouldn't be good.
I agree.
All right.
Ryan, I
Well,
too changed my degree from computer science to cybersecurity.
Did you?
That programming 101 sucked. You can't compile pseudocode. It's silly. It made no sense to me.
I remember one of the reasons why I changed is because one of the classes we were building an airline reservation system in BASIC. And like I was able to do it, but man, not well. And I'm just like, I'm not going to be able to make a life out of this. I don't get it. And then I went more like tech support, Microsoft based type stuff from there. And that's where I got into IT. But yeah, I'm with you on that.
I think
I
we
majored
all
in
universally had the coding 101 experience. Sounds very similar to mine too.
I majored in geology.
Rocks. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I just grew up in a technology household where, yeah, I mean, in the 80s, we had my mom was one of the not one of the first, well, one of the first like female executives at IBM. And so she had stuff and, so they're always bringing home tech stuff. And I'm a guy with ADHD as an only child, a lot of time on my hands, really bored. So I always took it and broke it to try to figure out how it worked. So that's how I got into hacking stuff and technology. It was just curiosity. But yeah, I never had any formal training. I've never been to any classes. It's just mostly because back in the early days, you didn't have Google, you didn't have, yeah, I mean, you didn't have
We
any
didn't have much.
documentation.
Yeah.
It was all, it was a lot of RTFM. The things came with manuals, but yeah, there was no place to really go for answers other than, a small group of people that you knew or just break it, figure out how to put it back together again. Yeah, Microsoft came out with those CDs. I don't remember what they were tech something. What were the tech? Shit, I can't remember what the name of it was, but that was the first and so you carried around this little satchel with like
TechNet?
TechNet, exactly. You had like 50,
Mm-hmm.
100 CDs in this satchel that you'd carry around to, try to figure out how things worked.
Yep.
Oh, well.
Cool.
All right.
So
Well, so July 4th is coming up. I'm going to finish this chapter 19. I'll get this, baked up for sure by tomorrow so that we'll still have the office open and we can publish it. And that's all I got.
cool. In that
I
case,
preached a lot. My bad. I don't get out much.
that's cool, man. It's good information, and it was very valid, real world sort of experience. Not sort of, it was real world experience that goes along with what we're looking at here. So it makes
Yeah,
sense.
if you don't want to look like this when you get to be 54, listen to the experience. Don't live it.
All right. With that, is there anything else? Do we want to hit anything else while we've got here, or are we good for the evening?
I'm good. I'm going to eat some food.
Yeah, I need food too.
Maybe play some piano. Maybe take a shower, man. I'm looking like I'm sweaty.
I've got a bunny that I need to go give meds to, which if you've ever given a rabbit medications, it's not easy, especially with one person. So it's
All right.
always
Well,
fun.
good luck with that, man. Say a prayer for you.
I need it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Somebody else is asking about the challenge.
Oh, the challenge? Yeah, somebody already won. If you didn't know what the challenge was, then obviously you didn't win it. I think I'm waiting for an email from somebody. I can't remember who it was, but whatever. We'll figure it out. If I didn't spend so much damn time on the PowerPoint, I would have been able to create something fun on that. Maybe that'll be the second time around. Yeah.
Cool.
No practice questions. Do you want practice questions? We can do practice questions. Do you want to do practice questions, Brian?
We can. I've got some here that are ready to go.
Balaji Sastry would like some practice questions.
All right. Well, let me share my screen because that seems to be the best way to do this.
Yeah, just make them easy, will you? For crying out loud.
Then you're probably not gonna like these things.
Last time we had to think and stuff.
All right, you guys can see that hopefully.
Turned off my camera so you have a little more space. All right. Your organization's primary data center suffered a critical infrastructure failure. The alternate processing site is operational, but systems are not yet fully restored. You are using tapes shipped off-site weekly and have now restored data from 4 days ago. The recovery point objective is 24 hours, which control has clearly failed. Wow. If you're using tapes that are shipped off-site weekly from 4 days ago, it seems like a failure in the backup frequency. I mean, there's probably failures in all those, but that seems the most relevant.
Yeah, when I first read this one, I'm not gonna lie, I saw the first thing and I jumped on that real quick and only to realize that I was wrong.
I'm wrong.
No, you're correct. I was
good.
wrong.
Okay, thank God. Because
Time,
wait,
so.
I already passed the damn CISSP. I don't care.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about it. But this was actually a pretty good question because it was one that wanted you to think. But you are correct. It is the backup frequency policy is what failed here. Their recovery point was 24 hours, but their backups was 4 days. In this case, so they didn't have that. They weren't able to hit that as they had wanted to. So it's the idea behind that.
All right, that makes sense.
Number 2, investigations. A security analyst is preparing for a forensic report for a breach involving insider trading. The legal department advises the report may be reviewed in a court of law. Which of the following must be true about the handling of evidence? The evidence must be encrypted at rest and in transit. A certified forensics examiner must collect the evidence. Every access and transfer of the evidence must be documented. The chain of custody form must be signed by the CISO. So to give everybody a chance in chat to throw that in there, since there is a slight delay, I do want to throw this out there for the first one. When I read that and I thought that the wrong answer, I do want to stress that make sure you read everything twice. Read the question twice. Make sure you understand what it's asking you. That is so very key in this. So, anybody want to take a stab at this one?
Like any one of us?
Yep.
C.
Yeah, I'm torn between B and C.
I'm thinking C.
Yeah, probably C.
C is correct. You want to make sure that everything is documented for your chain of custody.
Yeah. If you don't like documentation, don't do forensics.
This is true. All right, ethics. A CISSP discovers that their employer is misrepresenting the company's compliance status to a regulatory authority. Which action aligns best with the ISC squared code of professional ethics? Like I said, this is extremely testable. So resign from the company to avoid legal liability. Report the misrepresentation to a competitor's compliance team. Escalate the issue internally and then externally if not resolved, or stay silent until formally subpoenaed to testify. This one's, any thoughts on this one from you guys? I'm going to save any comments.
I I mean, that one to me, you just kind of use your common sense rule.
Yeah. It's not comfortable for sure. That's a shitty position to be in. Hopefully you saw it coming. So you're not stuck here. But C is the right answer.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
I
So
think it
escalate.
even says something in the book about giving an adequate amount of time when you report a vulnerability to, I think it's like, is it 2-3 weeks, something like that?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what you're probably referring to is like if you report a vulnerability, like report to the people and say, hey, this is what we found. Don't just go public with it and just say, hey, we found this vulnerability. Give them time to fix it, basically.
Yeah.
All right. Question 4, disaster recovery planning. Your disaster recovery plan includes a hot site in another country. During an actual event, you discover that transferring personally identifiable information to the recovery site violates the country's privacy laws. What is the most significant failure in the planning process? Failure to implement secure VPN connections, failure to test cross-border data synchronization, failure to conduct a compliance impact assessment, or failure to choose a high availability site within national borders. So once again, I'll open this up to you guys since I already know the answer on this one.
I'm going
Well,
to
you
go
can make it.
with C, failure to conduct a compliance impact assessment.
Second that emotion.
Yeah, I agree. D could be valid too, and that'll be common, I think, in the test. It's been so long since I've taken it, but it sounds like it's still true. On the multiple choice questions, it's like 2 you can immediately eliminate, and then it's a kind of a debate between the final
Yes.
2, and this one kind of fits that for me.
So I know Jake and John, you guys have both taken the test more recently than I have. I know when I took it, it was that same thing where there was 2 questions or 2 answers that were pretty much like I can discount those immediately. Did you guys have that same experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Look for
Yeah.
that most significant, which one's best, which one's least. There's always going to be that qualifying word. I think they kind of want to trip you up a little bit.
Yeah, good point.
And Brandon, I'm just gonna to agree with you on this is ChatGPT very much loves the answer as C. And maybe we're seeing some sort of built-in learning behavior here as to why. I don't know, but I've noticed that as well when I was looking through this. All right, anyway, investigations. Which of the following would most likely render digital evidence inadmissible in court? Evidence was collected by a contractor instead of an employee. Evidence was collected before a warrant was issued. The evidence was duplicated using hardware imaging tool, or the original media was stored in a locked facility.
Oh wait, which of these would disqualify it for admissibility?
Yep.
Can you read the answers again?
Yep. Evidence was collected by a contractor instead of an employee. The evidence was collected before a warrant was issued. The evidence was duplicated using a hardware imaging tool. The original media was stored in a locked facility.
Wow, because I think I know what ChatGPT is getting at. Because in a civil matter, it doesn't matter if there's a warrant. It's a constitutional matter potentially if it's a criminal matter, because the other 3 seem to be legit. They wouldn't make them inadmissible. But certainly in a criminal case, if you collected evidence that violated the Constitution, that's not going to be admissible.
Yeah,
So
and that is the answer, is B. And the specific reasoning that it gave behind that is illegally obtained evidence is typically inadmissible under the exclusionary rule, especially in criminal cases. Is it synopsis? All right,
but
moving on to question.
nowhere in the question it didn't say anything about a criminal matter, right? It just said
It did not.
interesting.
All right, next up, an Infosec consultant is working with a client under NDA. While conducting a security assessment, the consultant discovers that the client is using unlicensed software extensively. What is the most ethical course of action? Report the software usage to a software vendor, document the findings in the report and notify client leadership, publicly disclose the issue after engagement ends, or ignore the issue since it's unrelated to security controls.
This one's easy.
I agree. I'm gonna go with B on that one.
I was going to totally go C. Just absolutely.
You gotta wait 3 weeks.
Oh yeah. Well, can I do 2? Is that okay? The answer is B. You're correct. All right. Question 7, disaster recovery planning. Which of the following best represents a key weakness of reciprocal agreements for disaster recovery? And I know this is something that Ron briefly mentioned. Is it the high cost of maintenance? Is it the inability to test the plan without impacting the partner? Difficulty in securing telecommunications? Or risk of simultaneous disasters at both sites?
Yes, no, well, let's cross off 2 and 2 because B and D are the legit options, but I think D is the best answer.
Second that.
I agree. It is D. You're correct. All right. Investigations. During an incident response, you find a key suspect's encrypted USB drive cannot be accessed without a passphrase. What is the best next step to preserve legal options and investigative integrity? A, attempt a brute force cracking immediately, or B, make it a bit for bit image of the USB drive and document the process. C, send the device to the software vendor for decryption, or D, place the device in an evidence locker until a court order is obtained.
Anarchy, brute force.
Yeah, hit it hard.
Heck yeah, man.
You could waterboard them. Wait, that's illegal
Yeah, I
now,
was
isn't
gonna
it?
say that's probably gonna get you in trouble.
Okay, all right, scratch that one off. Well, D then.
Definitely D.
So place the device in an evidence locker until court order is obtained.
That should help you maintain a chain of custody.
Yeah.
Gotcha. ChatGPT does not agree with you.
What does ChatGPT say?
They want a bit for bit image of the USB drive and document it.
Well, I mean, well, the question is, what to do with it because you can't get the password, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this would imply that I need to get the password, and the only way you're going to get the password is the court to order it.
I
So
get you.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, weird.
Gotcha. All right, disaster recovery planning. An organization's disaster recovery plan states the maximum tolerable downtime for a critical system is 48 hours. The recovery team restored the system in 36 hours, but the data was 3 days old. What aspect of the DR plan should be reevaluated? Recovery time objective, data sovereignty policy, recovery point objective, or business continuity scope?
I don't even know what the hell that B one is.
I don't know what that is either. I'm with you on that.
Well, sounds really cool.
I don't know if
Right.
it's valid here. I mean, how data sovereignty makes it seem like it's something totally different than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, for sure. She's the right answer then.
See, recovery point objective. You are
Recovery
correct.
point objective. Yeah.
All right. Next up, our last question about ethics. Government agency asks a CISSP to backdoor an encryption system to support national security interests. The backdoor will remain undisclosed and could be exploited by others. Which ethical principle is most at risk? Protect the infrastructure, advance and protect the profession, obey all contracts, or disclose vulnerabilities responsibly?
I'm not even going to answer this one.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one either, honestly.
This is a pretty crappy question, but I'm gonna go with B.
Yeah, you used to work. I mean, yeah, you're the government guy. I'm going with what you said.
Well, it's, they're asking you, what ethical issue is this violating? That seems to be the
Yeah,
best one to me.
they say it's protect the infrastructure.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
I stand
yeah,
corrected.
well, that's according to ChatGPT, and I don't think ChatGPT has a CISSP. I'm just saying.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to tell ChatGPT that too.
Right. Um, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You get a bit of insight onto some of our thoughts on some of these things in ChatGPT, as you can tell. So I'll get this off of your guys' screen. Anything else that we wanted to hit before we wrap it up for the evening?
Oh, I'm good, man. This was good. Thanks for letting me preach.
Okay, definitely, man. It's a good time. With that, then I will say, have a good one, ladies and gentlemen. Take it easy, and we'll see you guys next week.
Take
All
care,
right. See you
everyone.
next week.
See everybody.
Peace.
Cool. We are done.